You're always complaining about being cold, my mother-in-law remarked, her tone tinged with irritation. So, I went ahead and set up a bonfire in the yard for you. Go on, warm yourself up out there before you turn into an icicle. She gestured towards the backyard, visible through the window. Curious, I followed her pointing finger, only to be met with a sight that filled me with despair. My name is Rosetta. I'm 27 years old, a working housewife who juggles part-time shifts at a nearby supermarket. My husband Andy is 29, 2 years my senior, and works in an office. Together, we have a 1-year-old son named Daniel. Around a year before Daniel was born, we made the decision to move in with Andy's family. With his father's passing before our marriage and his mother living alone, it made sense financially to share a home and save money for our child. However, since then, the subtle jabs from my mother-in-law have only increased. After giving birth, I took a step back from my job to focus on Daniel. However, my mother-in-law wasn't pleased. I can take care of Daniel. Why don't you work outside? She'd say, implying it was the norm for a daughter-in-law to work when living together. She labeled me lazy for staying home. Adding insult to injury, she criticized my weight gain post-childbirth, accusing me of laziness. Despite feeling unwell, I resumed work, but I chose part-time hours to be with Daniel. Yet my mother-in-law wasn't satisfied. Can't you work more? She'd demand. I could, but Daniel was still young, and I yearned for more time with him. However, expressing this only earned me more disdain. Oh, are you implying dissatisfaction with my care? I raised Andy. I can raise a child better than you, who fell ill right after childbirth. Just work longer hours, she'd retort. I felt overwhelmed by her attitude, so I confided in Andy. Hoping for support, I explained, she wants me to work more, but I don't want to sacrifice time with Daniel. Can you talk to her? Disappointingly, Andy sided with his mother. Mom knows best about raising kids. You're only working part-time, right? We're here to save money, so just do as she says. Besides, you hadn't lost your post-pregnancy weight, he scoffed, echoing my mother-in-law's criticisms and urging me to work harder. One day, my mother-in-law decided to take matters into her own hands by calling my workplace and persuading them to increase my hours. Her connection with the part-time leader at the supermarket ensured my compliance. Unable to oppose this decision, I found myself juggling longer shifts alongside the already burdensome household chores. I barely had a moment for Daniel amidst the relentless demands. Leave Daniel to me, my mother-in-law would insist. You focus on work and house chores. And mind you, you haven't shed any weight yet, have you? It's rather unsightly, she'd remark, her criticisms cutting deep. Yet when Daniel needed attention or made a mess, suddenly, I was expected to intervene promptly. You're his mother? Handle it. Can't you discipline him properly? She'd scold, adding another layer of pressure. One particularly frustrating day, as I diligently cleaned the yard per my mother-in-law's instructions, Andy's criticism stung. Why are you so dirty? Don't come in the house like that, he chided, oblivious to my efforts. Feeling unjustly attacked, I snapped back, airing my grievances about the unequal distribution of household responsibilities. His reaction was dismissive, directing me to another room without so much as a glance. Fed up with the situation, I made a decision. Despite most of my salary going towards household expenses, I began documenting my mother-in-law and Andy's behavior. I recorded their words on my phone and meticulously chronicled daily events in a diary. It was a step towards reclaiming my voice and asserting my worth. On a chilly winter day, I gathered the courage to ask Andy for some money to invest in winter clothes. Why do you need new ones? He retorted, dismissing my request. You earn so little yet desire luxuries. Your old ones should suffice. Besides, they don't fit anymore, he added, not hesitating to critique my weight gain. With a begrudging gesture, he tossed a $50 bill my way. That should cover a few items, he remarked brusquely. Though I knew $50 wouldn't stretch far, I accepted it gratefully, silently plotting my exit from Andy's family home. On my way back from work, I stopped by a store and purchased a much-needed down jacket, a small step toward reclaiming some sense of comfort and security. However, my relief was short-lived. The following day, to my dismay, my new down jacket was nowhere to be found. Confused and frustrated, I approached my mother-in-law, who lounged leisurely in the living room. Have you seen my down jacket? I inquired. Her response left me speechless. Oh, I assumed you didn't need it anymore, so I got rid of it, she remarked casually, What? I just bought it yesterday, I exclaimed incredulously. Her nonchalant reply only added insult to injury. Did you? I must have placed it in the shed outside. Why don't you go and check? Hastily, I dashed to the shed, my heart sinking as I found my new jacket discarded amidst the refuse. Despite the biting cold, I attempted to salvage it, but the stench lingered stubbornly. Knowing that burning it indoors would only invite more complaints from my mother-in-law and Andy, I resolved to hand-wash it in the dead of night, hoping to conceal the evidence of its mishap. The next day brought another devastating discovery. Returning home from work, I noticed an eerie emptiness in my bedroom. All the drawers on the shelf that housed my clothes were devoid of their contents. My wardrobe had been stripped bare. Racing to confront my mother-in-law, I demanded answers. Where are my clothes? I implored. Her response hit me like a blow. You bought new ones, didn't you? So repurpose your old, dirty clothes into rags for cleaning. Now you can contribute to the household chores, she retorted callously. My heart sank further as I opened the cleaning closet, confirming her words. There, amidst the cleaning supplies, lay rags fashioned from my discarded garments. And as if her cruelty knew no bounds, I noticed my jacket, which had been left out to dry on the balcony, was now missing. You're always complaining about being cold, my mother-in-law interjected, her tone laced with false concern. So, I took the liberty of lighting a bonfire for you in the yard. With a slight, insincere smile, she motioned towards the garden outside my window, where flames danced in the fire pit. Peering outside, I watched in disbelief as shreds of my jacket fluttered in the wind. You burned my clothes. How am I supposed to survive this winter? I protested, my voice trembling with outrage. But my mother-in-law remained indifferent to my distress. You're chubby, so you'll be fine, she quipped callously before sauntering away, a smirk playing on her lips. I was left speechless, grappling with a mixture of fury and despair. With trembling hands, I hastily gathered my essentials. My diary, phone, and precious Daniel wrapped snugly in my only remaining coat. Ignoring the biting cold, I fled from Andy's house, clad only in a thin t-shirt, as heavy snowflakes cascaded around me. Panic surged through me as I realized the gravity of my situation. Thankfully, a compassionate neighbor, who had always harbored suspicions about my strained relationship with my mother-in-law, came to my aid. Despite the tension between them, this neighbor had remained vigilant, concerned for my well-being since the day I moved in with Andy's family. Recognizing the signs of distress, they offered me refuge and swiftly transported me to my parents' home, an hour away. Upon my arrival, my mother's eyes widened in alarm at the sight of my scant attire. Why are you dressed like that? Are you feeling unwell? Is it too warm in the car? She fretted, her concern palpable. Forced to flee Andy's household, I found myself in a dire situation. My clothes reduced to rags, my new jacket consumed by flames. All along, I had been meticulously gathering evidence for what I hoped would be a favorable divorce, but the threat to my safety became too palpable to ignore. With Daniel snugly wrapped in a coat, mercifully asleep, I fled, tears of relief streaming down my face at the thought that my mother-in-law hadn't wrested him from my arms. My mother, recognizing the urgency of my plight, sprang into action, rallying support. She swiftly reached out to my father and another individual whose intervention would prove crucial in the days to come. The following day brought a glimmer of hope in the form of unexpected aid. Responding to my mother's urgent call, my father-in-law's mother, whom we affectionately referred to as Grandma, arrived at our doorstep. As it turned out, my father and Andy's late father had shared a deep bond, and Grandma, despite the passing years, had maintained ties with my family. Our connection through these familial bonds had initially brought Andy and me together, forging the path to our marriage. Before our union, Auntie, Grandma's daughter and Andy's mother, had exuded warmth and kindness towards my parents. However, the relentless pressure and harassment from Andy's mother gradually tainted Andy's demeanor, transforming his once affable nature into cold indifference towards me. As I laid out the evidence before Grandma, her fury mirrored that of my parents. Without hesitation, she sprang into action, swiftly contacting a lawyer to initiate divorce proceedings. In a matter of days, arrangements were made, and we, accompanied by my parents and Grandma, embarked on a visit to Andy's family home, leaving Daniel in the capable care of my nearby sister. Upon our arrival, my mother-in-law's reaction was predictably hostile. "Where's Daniel, you kidnappers?" she bellowed as she stormed out of the house. However, Grandma, undeterred, stepped forward to challenge her accusation. Who are you calling the kidnapper, you money grubber? She retorted, her voice dripping with disdain. Andy, apparently having taken time off work for the occasion, joined us as we gathered to discuss the impending divorce, Daniel's custody, and the fate of the family property. As tensions simmered, the lawyer laid out the plan. We're here to address Rosetta and Andy's divorce, determine custody arrangements for Daniel, and discuss the sale of this property, he announced solemnly. Andy scoffed at the notion of selling the property. What do you mean by selling the land? It's Dad's ancestral home, and Mom inherited it. You can't just sell it, he interjected derisively. The lawyer, however, remained unfazed, presenting a document outlining the overdue land rent payments spanning several years since Andy's father's passing. While the building may be under Andy's mother's ownership, the land itself belongs to Andy's father's family, the lawyer explained calmly. We've been lenient regarding the unpaid land rent, but now it's time to settle the debt and proceed with the sale. The document detailed the accumulated rent for the land over several years following the passing of my father-in-law. As my mother-in-law scanned the figures, a look of shock crossed her face. How can we pay this all of a sudden? She exclaimed in disbelief. Grandma swiftly silenced her with a stern quiet before addressing the issue at hand. We've been sending you notifications every month. You chose to ignore them, she rebuked. And more importantly, you need to make amends for how you've treated Rosetta. Unmoved, my mother-in-law attempted to deflect the blame. Rosetta's accusations. She's just my daughter-in-law. Why should it concern anyone else? She argued defiantly. She's probably making things up. She's always been deceitful, finding excuses to avoid chores and work. My mother-in-law continued, her voice rising in frustration as she directed her accusations towards Grandma. I've never lied simply because you believe I'm overweight, I asserted firmly, my voice trembling with suppressed anger. You've burdened me with endless chores, robbing me of precious time with my child. Do you have any idea how difficult it was to be instructed to brave the winter cold in nothing but a t-shirt? You've been spreading these falsehoods to anyone who will listen, always eager to shirk responsibility, my mother-in-law retorted with a smug grin. However, her confidence waned when I played back the recorded snippets of her and Andy's snide comments from my phone. That's fabricated, she exclaimed, her facade faltering. In a moment of frustration and desperation, I dashed to the closet, snatching up a rag crafted from my discarded clothes. Slamming it onto the table, I challenged her, how do you explain this? My clothes reduced to rags, just as captured in the recording. Enough, Rosetta? Perhaps Mom's actions were a tad extreme, but let's not overlook the fact that your lack of effort only fueled her frustration, Andy interjected, his tone laced with condescension. Before pointing fingers, take a moment to reflect on your own actions. Excuse me, are you blind? Since moving here, I've shed at least 22 pounds, he continued defensively. The reason my clothes don't fit isn't because I've gained weight, but because I've lost it so rapidly. Everyone except you and Mom is concerned about how thin I've become. Andy's words seemed to dawn on him as he acknowledged the extent of my weight loss. I deeply regret entrusting Rosetta to your care, my father chimed in, his voice tight with restrained anger. Clenching his fists on his lap, he fixed the steely gaze on Andy and the others. But I've been the primary caregiver for Daniel, Andy persisted, his determination evident. Rosetta simply isn't equipped to handle him. We're prepared to take this to court to ensure we retain custody of Daniel. Indeed, courts typically lean towards the mother's favor, the lawyer interjected calmly, his tone carrying an air of authority. But consider this, would they entrust Daniel to individuals who fail to even notice Rosetta's dramatic weight loss? Can you afford the expenses associated with hiring a lawyer and covering court fees? Furthermore, I will also be pursuing claims for alimony and land rent for this property. The gravity of the situation seemed to dawn on my mother-in-law. This is so unjust, she muttered, her voice trembling with frustration. Who's being unjust here? My father countered, his tone firm. Both of you have tormented Rosetta and even attempted to separate her from Daniel. Where did the money Rosetta earned go? Why did she flee to her parents' home in nothing but a t-shirt, carrying Daniel through a snowstorm? My usually reticent mother-in-law's facade crumbled as she began to weep, casting blame on my mother-in-law. I am truly sorry. We will make amends for spoiling Daniel and causing Rosetta such anguish. Grandma spoke up, addressing us directly before signaling to the lawyer. Simply settle your debts and we'll sever all direct ties with you and inform our relatives, I asserted firmly. Following that resolution, I tendered my resignation from the part-time position, duly informing headquarters of my mother-in-law's meddling. The company expressed regret and assured me of measures to prevent such power imbalances among part-timers. While no repercussions were reported for the individual acquainted with my mother-in-law, assurances were made regarding future safeguards. In the ensuing weeks, my divorce from Andy reached its conclusion. Securing custody of Daniel and receiving a fair amount of child support, I navigated the challenges with resolve. Andy's financial strain was palpable, particularly as he assumed responsibility for the outstanding land rent. Grandma's light-hearted jest about the house's fate hinted at the irony of the situation. Transitioning to a new phase of life, I relished the opportunity to reside with my parents, cherishing the precious moments spent with Daniel. With plans to eventually join my father's company, I utilized the divorce settlement to rejuvenate my wardrobe, reveling in the joy of coordinating outfits with Daniel. As I looked toward the future, I eagerly anticipated the prospect of devoting even more time to my son. My name's Karen. I'm 25 and work a regular job. My grandpa, who looked after me, passed away 6 months back. Today's the day when the lawyer will read out Grandpa's will. So I went to his house with my older sister Susan, who's my only family. Our folks died in a crash 20 years ago, so we grew up with our grandparents. Grandma died from being sick a while ago, and since then, Grandpa's health kept getting worse. Worried about him, I moved into an apartment nearby and visited him often. Karen, you're not a kid anymore. It's weird to keep running back here, my grandpa used to say, though he'd chuckle anyway. Then, one day, when I came over like always, I found him in pain at the door. Panicked, I called for help, but he passed away suddenly. Quit summing out. Make some tea at least, my sister's voice snapped me back. Right, the lawyer's coming, I replied, heading to the kitchen. Glancing back, I saw Susan lounging lazily on the floor, yawning. Even from the kitchen, her perfume was overwhelming. Same old Susan, I muttered, putting the kettle on. Susan never changed. She dyed her hair since she was a teenager, hung out with troublemakers, and never worked. Grandma and Grandpa always had to clean up her messes, and it seems she's still the same even as an adult. She's always bouncing from one part-time gig to another without any stability. I knew she'd been hitting up Grandpa for cash when I wasn't around. I could picture her finding it all too bothersome if it wasn't for the inheritance. Ah, you must be the lawyer. Thanks for being here today. My sister's formal tone announced the lawyer's arrival. Rushing, I filled the teapot with leaves and headed to the door. Thanks for coming, I greeted him. I'd seen him at the funeral. His eyes were kind, like Grandpa's. His lawyer badge gleamed on his chest. After paying respects to Grandpa's portrait, he sipped the tea I served and then pulled out Grandpa's will. It was entrusted to him while Grandpa was alive. The will stated, my sister Susan would get $20 million in cash, and I would inherit the house and land. My sister burst into laughter upon hearing the will. $20 million for the older sis and just an old house for you? How funny. Fits someone as dull as you, she mocked. It's not just the house. There's also the land, I shot back, but she only laughed sarcastically. Psh, this land in the middle of nowhere isn't worth much. I'd have preferred cash. Guess Grandpa favored me after all. I have to admit, it's a bit surprising. I guess Grandpa wanted me to take care of his cherished house and land, where he spent his life with Grandma, I said, reflecting on the will. A house and land? That's pretty cool, isn't it, Ryan? My boyfriend exclaimed, surprised by the news. I shook my head, silently conveying, it's not all that great, really. My sister got $20 million in cash. That's more impressive. Saying it aloud felt empty, even though I was just being honest. Wow, she's got looks and money now. She's on a winning streak, Brian remarked, unaware of how insensitive his comment sounded. Catching my glance, he quickly added, but your happiness means more to me than any money, Karen. Brian and I have been together since I started working. We met at a party, and being the same age, we hit it off. I've introduced him to my grandpa and my sister. Though he hasn't popped the question yet, I've been thinking about marriage. Today, on our first outdoor date, I ended up sharing the news of my inheritance with Brian. I guess I did it because I envisioned him as my future husband. Little did I know I would regret it later. A few days later, I went to the family home I inherited from my grandfather. I planned to tidy up and organize his belongings. The property was spacious, but the house was simple. I thought I could handle it alone as I looked around and contemplated. It's close to my job. Maybe I should move in here. Living peacefully with a cat doesn't sound too bad. No rent to worry about, and any upkeep expenses should be manageable since I've been saving up. Maybe someday with Brian. Blushing at the thought, I shook my head to clear it. Ready to get started on cleaning, I rolled up my sleeves, but then my phone rang. My sister's name flashed on my phone screen. "Hey Karen, having a blast all alone in that old house?" My sister sounded tipsy, elongating her words in her usual manner. But today it was worse than usual. "Looks like you're hitting the bottle, huh?" "It's still daytime," I remarked with a sigh, to which she let out an exaggerated sigh in return. "Oh, you're such a goody two-shoes." I was right, she was definitely drinking. "I was thinking about moving in here eventually," I replied, hoping to wrap up the conversation quickly. "Really? I'm lounging in a fancy hotel suite right now," my sister exclaimed in an overly dramatic tone. "Guest is keeping me company?" "I have no clue." "Boring. That attitude won't win Brian over," she teased. "What?" "Sorry, Karen." Brian's voice suddenly chimed in, catching me off guard. Confusion swirled in my mind, but I pushed away any unsettling thoughts. My imagination was playing tricks on me again, conjuring up absurd scenarios. "Shocked, huh?" My sister's spiteful voice cut through. "Ever since you introduced him to me, I thought Brian was quite a catch," she bragged, recounting how she'd been drawn to Brian since I introduced them, how she found out where he worked because of me, and how she'd approached him as soon as he finished work. He had eagerly gone along with her, telling her she was far more attractive than me. I listened in disbelief, unable to find words. "Karen, I'm so sorry." Brian's voice came next. "Please tell me this is a mistake." I tried to speak, but he continued. "As a guy, I couldn't pass up the chance. I do feel guilty, but come on, who can resist a beautiful woman with $20 million, right?" His words, asking for understanding, left me feeling drained of emotion. A chill washed over me, as if all warmth had been sucked away. "You know what? I don't meet a man like you," I declared. My sister's laughter echoed loudly in the background. The voice on the phone reverted to hers. "Well, that's the way it goes. Let's not pretend to be sisters anymore, okay? I don't want you running to me just because you're broke." With those cutting words, she hung up. Overwhelmed by delayed emotions, all I could do was cry out. It's been 5 years since then. A cat was curled up on my lap, peacefully dozing in front of my laptop. It purred contentedly in its sleep. Today was my day off, but I still had some work to finish up at home. "Oh no, this won't help get the work done," I thought guiltily as I gently moved the cat aside. Just as I reached for my phone, it began to ring. An unfamiliar number flashed on the screen. Thinking it might be work-related, I answered without hesitation. "Hey Karen, it's been ages." The voice on the other end greeted me, instantly recognizable as my sister's. I froze at the sound of her familiar tone. "It's me, Karen. I can tell by the way you say hello. After all, I'm your big sister." 5 years had passed, making Susan 34 now. I couldn't help but smirk at her unchanged manner of speaking. "You're still the same. By the way, I came home, and there's a hotel in its place. Did you sell the house?" "That's none of your business." "Ah, come on. It's a pretty fancy hotel, right? You must have made a good amount of cash." Growing irritated, I was about to hang up when she launched into chatter about her current situation. According to Susan, she'd blown through the inheritance in just 2 years and now found herself in significant debt. Even Brian, who she was still with, seemed to be struggling financially. I was left speechless. Honestly, I couldn't care less. "Sorry, but that's not happening," I replied calmly, despite Susan's yelling. I had always questioned why Grandpa had divided his estate that way. But on the day you took Brian from me and cut ties, I finally understood. I began to speak slowly. 5 years ago, when Brian ended things, I was devastated. After sobbing my heart out, I sat numbly in my room, lost in thought. "I'm such a fool," I whispered, tears streaming down my face once more. My gaze fell on a painting I had crafted as a child and given to my grandfather. He had cherished it, framing it and displaying it with pride. With shaky hands, I retrieved the painting. "Grandpa, As waves of nostalgia and loneliness washed over me, tears blurring my vision, I noticed something fall from the back of the frame. Picking it up, I realized it was a fresh sheet of notepaper addressed to me. I remembered how, as a child, I used to stick notes on the back of that frame, exchanging secret messages with my grandfather. It was like our family journal. Knowing I would inherit the house, he must have assumed I would find this note. I was grateful I noticed it. The thought of leaving it unnoticed sent shivers down my spine. To Karen, the letter began, dated just before my grandfather's passing. I knew you'd find this letter eventually. You're probably wondering why I divided my estate this way, giving cash to your sister and leaving you the old house and land. It may seem like I favored Susan, but that's not true. Despite appearances, I wanted to leave most of my estate to you, who cared for me until the end. Finally, everything clicked into place. Despite Susan's words, Grandpa valued me more, huh? I'm sure Susan's cruel remarks hurt deeply at the time. Despite my greater love for Grandpa, a pang of jealousy, I continued reading the letter. But Susan wouldn't be satisfied with a fair split. This girl, even as her grandfather, I must admit, she's terribly greedy. Just like her grandpa. She even stole my boyfriend. That's why I want to tell him deep down. I thought to myself, that's why I set things up this way. At first glance, Susan may seem to have gotten the better deal, but she won't pay much attention to your share. According to Grandpa's letter, the value of this land in our area keeps increasing due to ongoing urban development. It may not be worth Susan's $20 million yet, but its value will surely rise in the future. As I read further, my eyes widened in surprise. You can live here if you're attached to it, or you can sell it when its value rises enough to make a good profit. All I want is for you to be happy. After conveying the letter's content, Susan clicked her tongue and muttered, "Old hag." I did live in that house for a while, but when I got married, I decided to sell it, just like Grandpa's letter suggested. The land value had risen enough by then. I'm not lending you any money, Susan said, sounding frustrated. Then, as if struck by an idea, she added, "Hey, how about this? I'll give Brian back to you. Help out your sister. It's a good deal, right?" In that moment, something inside me snapped. Enough is enough. Grandpa took care of you, and yet you've shown no gratitude. I'm disgusted by that. You're not my sister anymore, and I'm already married. I don't need Brian, and I don't even want to see his face. Stay out of my life for good, I declared before hanging up. I quickly blocked her number, and my cat, sensing the tension, retreated to the bed. I scooped up my cat and whispered, "I'm sorry." Soon after, Susan and Brian barged into our old house. Were they trying to return Brian to me? They seemed to have misunderstood something, yelling about being my family, even though I had already sold the land and had no ties to it anymore. It's pretty straightforward for those two. I sold the land, and an inn was built on it. Therefore, I must be the owner of the inn. Naturally, the staff reported them to the police. They were arrested for damaging several items in the inn. Additionally, it was uncovered that they had engaged in marriage fraud for money in the past. It seems they'll be sent to prison together. I was also questioned by the police, but I quickly proved that I had no involvement. Since we were estranged, I was released. As my husband and I were leaving the station, we heard shouting and turned to look. There were Susan and Brian, looking completely different. Thankfully, they didn't notice us. Both of them had disheveled hair, worn-out clothes, and looked nothing like the people I remembered. Especially Susan, who never went without makeup and stylish attire, looked drastically different. They were likely being transferred to another location. As I watched them, a wave of melancholy washed over me. My husband and I exchanged a glance, and he offered his hand. I took it, and together we left the police station. "Are you all right?" My husband's eyes were full of concern as he looked at me. "I'm okay. I have you and our little one," I said, placing my hand on my slightly swollen belly and returning his smile. There's a new member of our family growing inside me. Money is important, but there's something even more precious. That's what I want to instill in our child with you by my side.
You won't be joining the family trip because it's not fun when there are other people around. But hey, I might bring you a souvenir if I remember, said my mother-in-law cheerfully on the phone. I was supposed to go on the trip with my in-laws and husband, but I got left behind. Since we got married, my mother-in-law, who really loves her son, never misses a chance to make a sarcastic comment or nag me to stay home. This is becoming a problem. When I told her about it, my mother-in-law just laughed, almost like she was making fun of me. Is that a problem? Too bad for you. Consider it a punishment for not listening to my advice. And then she hung up, saying it's not my problem but yours, right? I'm Jessica, a 30-year-old working housewife. I handle household chores and work part-time at the local supermarket. I've been married to my husband, Mike, for 3 years now. We met while working at the same company, though in different departments. We used to chat a lot on the same floor even before we started dating. Our connection deepened during a year-end party at the office. Despite being in different departments, I ended up sitting next to Mike. Since we were already close, our conversation flowed naturally. Mike excused himself to the bathroom at one point, and I was left listening to the lively chatter of the group next to us. Suddenly, a tipsy boss from another department began bothering me, insisting I drink more. Feeling unsure about how to handle it, Mike returned from the bathroom just in time. He saw what was happening, calmly placed his hands on the boss's shoulders, and guided him away to another table. After a bit, Mike came back to our table alone and asked, "That guy really can't handle his alcohol, can he? Are you okay?" That moment made me see Mike in a new light, and I decided to confess my feelings first, which led to our relationship. Things went smoothly from there, and we got married 3 years ago. Even though we don't have kids yet, our married life is strong. But there's one issue bothering me. My mother-in-law, with whom we currently live. Mike and I reside in his parents' house. Initially, we lived in an apartment, but it got affected by a fire in the neighboring unit, and our place got flooded during the firefighting effort. Having no other option, we had to evacuate since the apartment was uninhabitable. Unsure of where to go during the repairs, Mike's mother suggested, "Why don't you two stay at our place?" Grateful for the offer, we decided to live with Mike's parents. The trouble began after we moved in. Though she occasionally made snide comments even before, I tolerated them due to her deep love for Mike. However, her nagging intensified after we started living together. For example, one weekend, it happened as I was enjoying a cup of coffee in the living room after finishing all the housework. My mother-in-law returned home and immediately started bustling around the house. Then she came up to me and said, "Jessica, your cleaning is too sloppy. You need to spend more time on it and show some gratitude for your hard-working husband. As his wife, it's your duty to support him. I can't believe you can't even do this much. You're failing as a wife." I thought, here we go again. As these were almost daily comments, it seemed the only reason she allowed us to live together was to be with her son Mike again, and my presence as a wife was probably nothing more than an annoyance to her. Mike intervened, saying, "Please don't be so hard on Jessica." Well, there is some truth to what you're saying. Even if she's working part-time, slacking off on housework isn't good. Mike often sided with his mother, and while it's okay to value his biological mother, I sometimes wished he would stand up for me, his wife. In truth, I never intended to neglect household chores. Even working 4 days a week, I always managed our family's chores, even if just for a short time. This commitment held true even when I wasn't feeling well. Contrastingly, my mother-in-law, despite being a housewife, enjoys herself outside almost every day. Since we started living together, I haven't witnessed her doing any household chores. However, given that we're residing in her house, I can't openly express my dissatisfaction. In this awkward situation, I simply kept my patience. Then one day, something unexpected occurred. Mike proposed that we go on a trip, just the two of us. How about a spa resort next month? The busy season is over, and I need to take some annual leave. If I'm going to relax, I thought it would be nice to go somewhere peaceful. A spa sounds fantastic. I haven't scheduled any work shifts for next month, so I can take time off. After discussing details, we decided on a 2-day spa trip in the middle of the next month. Since we planned to go on a weekday, we anticipated a quiet and leisurely time. I was thrilled and couldn't contain my excitement. Whenever I had a moment, I gathered information about our destination. Just as we were considering booking our stay, my mother-in-law made an unexpected statement. Jessica, I heard you're going on a trip with Mike. Why didn't you tell me? Well, honestly, I was afraid you might insist on joining if you knew. But I couldn't say that. As I stumbled for words, my mother-in-law sighed in frustration. Then she voiced exactly what I feared. Next month is my husband's and my anniversary. I'd love to celebrate with a family trip. A luxurious hotel would be perfect. Like a child throwing a tantrum, my mother-in-law expressed her desire to go on the trip. Of course, I have no interest in going on a trip with my mother-in-law. But this time, Mike and I were considering going by ourselves. How about we plan to go together next time? I tried to be accommodating in my response, but my mother-in-law wouldn't relent, insisting it's not the same if it's not for our anniversary celebration. In my mind, I thought she should go with her husband for their anniversary celebration. Just as I was about to express that, Mike walked in from work. Mike, welcome home. I was just discussing the trip with Jessica. Oh, I can't wait. My mother-in-law, already excited, began sharing her wishes, and Mike seemed to be in agreement with her. I wondered who spilled the beans about the trip, and it probably was Mike the way things were unfolding. Catching my gaze, Mike appeared a bit uneasy. Mom is really looking forward to it, so let's postpone our trip for another time. It'll be even more enjoyable if we all go together. By the way Mike was talking, it seemed he had already decided we were all going on the trip. Then my father-in-law chimed in, saying, "A vacation, huh? Sounds like fun." With that, it became impossible for me to decline the trip with the four of us. All right, next time it's just going to be the two of us. Promise. Reluctantly, I agreed, and Mike gave me a relieved look. I wasn't entirely satisfied, but there was nothing I could do about it at this point. At the very least, I decided I would take charge of choosing the sightseeing spots and local dishes we wanted to experience. So I assumed the responsibility of making all the hotel reservations and planning the sightseeing schedule. Since my mother-in-law dislikes handling such preparations, my suggestions were accepted without any issues. The day of the trip arrived, and I had packed everything, including clothes, the day before. The plan was to wake up an hour before departure, have a relaxed breakfast, and then leave the house. I awoke to the sound of my alarm clock and stretched out, realizing Mike, who should have been beside me, was absent. Assuming he might be up and preparing, I headed to the living room. However, he wasn't there, nor in the bathroom, kitchen, or by the front door. Even my mother-in-law and father-in-law were nowhere to be seen. Could it be? With a sinking feeling, I dialed Mike's cell phone, but the call didn't connect. Calling my mother-in-law's phone next, she answered promptly. "Oh, Jessica dear, what's up?" "Mike can't answer right now. He's driving." "Where are the three of you?" I asked, and my mother-in-law responded casually. "Isn't it obvious? We're on a family vacation. We can't enjoy it with an outsider around, so you'll have to stay home. If we remember, we might even bring you a souvenir." I heard my mother-in-law's triumphant voice over the phone. "Stay at home? That's going to be a problem." At my words, my mother-in-law laughed scornfully. "Is that a problem? Poor you, just consider it punishment for not heeding my advice." With that, she abruptly hung up. I covered my face with both hands and shook my shoulders. Yet what escaped my mouth wasn't a sob, but a hearty laugh. They better enjoy their journey. I'm sure they'll regret leaving me behind. The sound of my alarm clock woke me up, and I stretched out, expecting to find Mike beside me. However, he was nowhere to be seen. Thinking he might have already gotten up and started preparing, I made my way to the living room. To my surprise, Mike wasn't there, and he wasn't in the bathroom, kitchen, or by the front door either. Even my mother-in-law and father-in-law were mysteriously absent. A sinking feeling crept over me. I dialed Mike's cell phone, but the call didn't connect. Trying my mother-in-law's phone next, she answered promptly. "Oh, Jessica dear, what's up?" "Mike can't answer right now. He's driving." "Where are the three of you?" I asked, and my mother-in-law responded nonchalantly. "Isn't it obvious? We're on a family vacation. We can't enjoy it with an outsider around, so you'll have to stay home. If we remember, we might even bring you a souvenir." My mother-in-law's triumphant voice echoed over the phone. "Stay at home? That's going to be a problem," I retorted, and she scoffed. "Is that a problem? Poor you, just consider it punishment for not listening to my advice." With that, she abruptly hung up. I covered my face with both hands and shook my shoulders. But instead of tears, hearty laughter escaped my lips. They better enjoy their journey. I'm sure they'll regret leaving me behind. Swiftly, I accessed a hotel booking site and secured a reservation at a lavish hotel in the tourist spot scheduled for today. Additionally, I booked a table at a restaurant for a delightful solo dinner experience. After a quick attire change and applying makeup, I had breakfast, thinking, all right, time to have fun. Grabbing my luggage, I hopped on the train. Armed with researched tourist spots I longed to explore, I embarked on a solo trip with a clear goal in mind. It's a small tourist spot, so there's a chance I might encounter Mike and the in-laws, but I'm unfazed. After all, they're the ones at fault. As these thoughts crossed my mind, the train arrived at its destination. From here on, I would let go of concerns about my mother-in-law and Mike, focusing on relishing the experience to the fullest. With this mindset, I ventured into a charming boutique, savored tea in a trendy cafe, and interacted with the locals, thoroughly enjoying my solo adventure. As night fell, it was time to check in. The hotel I had chosen ranked among the top luxury establishments in the area. I felt the need for a drastic change to rejuvenate myself. Walking through the automatic hotel doors towards the check-in counter, a woman's loud voice caught my attention. "Why can't we stay here? We're willing to pay." Upon closer inspection, I realized it was my mother-in-law causing the commotion. Naturally, they couldn't stay, as this wasn't the hotel I had booked for the four of us. Watching from a safe distance, I noticed Mike spotting me and exclaimed, "Hey Jessica, what's going on? We couldn't stay at the hotel you had booked, so we had to find another hotel, and they're full." As he approached me aggressively, my mother-in-law did the same, her face turning beet red with anger. Well, that's to be expected. They won't hand over the keys unless the person who made the reservation is present. It's a security measure. I did warn you, didn't I? At this point, they finally seemed to grasp their foolishness, exchanging glances in utter disbelief. Just as they were about to cause more chaos, several hotel staff members rushed over. The sight of my mother-in-law being gently but firmly escorted out of the hotel was rather comical. Remember this, we will stay in a place far more luxurious than this hotel. Feeling somewhat relieved, I decided to proceed with my check-in, leaving my accommodation-less mother-in-law and Mike behind. After completing the check-in process, I was escorted to my room. With its immaculate decor and opulent interior, it felt like I was in a dream. After placing my luggage down, I opted to explore the hotel. After a leisurely stroll, I returned to the check-in lobby, where guests kept arriving. I settled on a sofa and lost myself in thought for a while. As I sat there, a pair of young women settled beside me, animatedly sharing their impressions of the hotel. Their conversation took an interesting turn. "Hey, have you heard about the hotel near the station? There's a pretty spooky rumor going around. Supposedly, you can hear hallucinations in the second-floor room, and all your belongings get stolen. And not just that, there's even a case where someone died, and nobody knows who did it to this day. We're fortunate to be staying here, aren't we? Is that for real? But why hasn't anyone been arrested? You call the police in a situation like that, right? Well, there are rumors that the hotel staff are involved too. So creepy." What a chilling story. Glancing at the time, I realized it was nearly the hour for my dinner reservation. I swiftly got up and hurried to the restaurant. That was so satisfying. After relishing dinner, I returned to the hotel, took a relaxing bath, changed into my pajamas, and was watching TV when my smartphone notified me of an incoming call. "Hello, we found a hotel we can stay in. It's super comfortable. Too bad you can't stay here with us. Well, we'll enjoy it twice as much for you, so no worries. It was my cheerful mother-in-law on the line. Huh, is that so? You're fortunate to have found a place on such short notice. My response was nonchalant, prompting my mother-in-law to continue. Isn't it? It's quiet and easy to spend time because there are hardly any other guests. It's close to the tourist spot and is a beautiful hotel. I wonder why that is. That's when it dawned on me. Could it be the hotel near the station? That's right. What about it? I recalled the unsettling story I overheard in the hotel lobby before heading to dinner. I think you should run. While I didn't necessarily believe the rumor, there's often a grain of truth in these tales. However, my mother-in-law dismissed my comment with laughter. Are you jealous of us staying at a good place? Well then, be regretful. Bye. Once again, she unilaterally ended the call, and I had no desire to call her back. Having offered my advice and fulfilled my duty, I powered off my smartphone. I wanted to enjoy my relaxation time without any further interruptions. After that, I spent a leisurely evening and peacefully drifted into a comfortable sleep. The next day, after checking out of the hotel, I visited the tourist spots I missed the day before and returned home as the sun was setting. Light spilled from the windows of the house, indicating the return of the three of them. I'm home. I deliberately announced my return in my usual manner. Upon opening the door to the living room, all three started talking simultaneously. Though taken aback, I managed to calm them down. Then my mother-in-law began recounting the incident from the previous night. After the three had gone to sleep, there were rustling sounds, and my mother-in-law reported hearing someone entering the room. Paralyzed by fear, she quietly stayed in bed as the intruder seemed to wander around the room for about 10 minutes before departing silently. Relieved, my mother-in-law went back to sleep, only to wake up the next morning and discover that all their belongings, including wallets and smartphones, were gone. The only items left were the coin pouch and key holder that Mike had placed in his jacket's inside pocket. In a state of panic, they reported the incident to the hotel staff, only to be coldly told, "Please pay for the room at least," without any effort to involve the police. Faced with this dilemma, the distressed trio used the remaining coins in Mike's possession to make a call from a public phone to a nearby relative, seeking assistance. Fortunately, the relative arrived promptly, covering the hotel charges and ensuring their safe return home. While they mentioned intentions to report the incident to the police soon, their frustration turned towards me. If only you had earnestly warned us to leave, we wouldn't be in this mess. Exactly. You share some responsibility for this, Jessica. What do you plan to do about it? Yet, if my in-laws hadn't left me behind for their trip, this wouldn't have occurred in the first place. When I candidly expressed this sentiment, Mike erupted in anger. Shut up. You're just the wife. Don't get cheeky. We're getting a divorce. I can't put up with you anymore. I was too stunned to respond. Silently, I went to our bedroom, retrieved something from the cabinet, and returned to the living room to reveal it to Mike. Divorce. Fine by me. I don't need a husband who won't protect his mistreated wife. Mike's complexion turned pale. What I presented were the divorce papers prepared by a lawyer, as I had been anticipating this day. Perhaps not expecting my agreement, Mike was flustered. No, maybe we should think about it a little more. However, my mother-in-law seized the opportunity to push Mike towards the divorce. You should just get rid of such a horrible wife. Your mom will find you someone new. Unable to resist his mother's influence, Mike eventually consented to the divorce. Well then, goodbye. Please enjoy your life with your beloved family. Ignoring Mike, who was breaking down, I left the house. Later, through my lawyer, I submitted the divorce papers, and the divorce was successfully finalized. Despite Mike's pitiful pleas for reconciliation, I steadfastly ignored them all. I'm going to protect Jessica from now on, he claimed. Unfortunately, it was too late. On the flip side, my mother-in-law, who had successfully rid herself of me, initially appeared to be in good spirits. However, her joy was short-lived. The news of the divorce and the end of their shared living arrangement spread throughout the neighborhood. The gossip mongers connected it to her mistreatment of me, unveiling her unpleasant character. People in the community began pointing fingers at her, and the prospect of finding a new wife for Mike seemed to lose its urgency. I returned to my hometown and secured a new job through a friend's recommendation. I've had my fill of marriage for now. It seems like I'll relish the freedom of being single for a while.